Thank you for staying with us, viewers, here in The Scope with me, Waqar Rizvi. The Chinese and American trade delegations are meeting in an effort to resolve their row ahead of a March 2nd deadline that Trump announced before adding more tariffs on Chinese imports. The case against a Huawei executive is also overshadowing, global progress in technology, with 5G and other such vital new tech in the crosshairs. Is Trump carrying through his promise to put America first by ensuring his country's businesses remain superior? To discuss all of that a bit further, we're joined by Mr. Jamie Mulholland, who is a geopolitical analyst and China specialist. He's contributed to the University of Nottingham's Asia Research Institute, and he's joining us now via Skype from London. We're also joined by Mr. Riccardo Benussi, who is a deputy regional manager at Dezan Shira Associates. He's joining us there from Shanghai. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us. Riccardo, I'd like to start with you, if I may. What do you make, Riccardo, of the current state of these U.S.-China trade dispute?
Well, thank you very much for having me on the program. And it is indeed, I think we're in the thick of the moment right now, because as we are speaking, Liu He and Robert Lighthizer, they are meeting, and if not at the end of the first day of meetings already in Washington. So there's a lot of expectation on what it will turn out to be. I think that we can safely say that we're expecting for positive outcomes before March the 1st or the 2nd, and before the tariffs will be, or new tariffs will be slapped on a number of goods. Mm-hmm. But I do have, from my perspective, which is the consulting side, the professional consulting side of foreign direct investment, from the Chinese perspective, a couple of comments. I mean, mm-hmm. we are used to taking any statistics from the Chinese authorities with more than just a grain of salt, correct? So mm-hmm. now that we're in this economic turmoil, which is especially ignited by some signs of lower consumption in China and the trade war itself, I think we need to be even more careful.
Okay.
But the real numbers that are interesting for us for the trade war are the ones that we need to focus on. But as much as we are and have to remain skeptical about the accuracy of the numbers reported by the Chinese government, which are the reflection, evidently, of the trade war, every second day we read about official announcements in Beijing level, or provincial level, or even here in Shanghai city level, or even Guangzhou, that concerning the GDPs aren't met, decline, growth is registered, and in general, the central government and some of the most financially important cities of China, such as this one, Shanghai, where I sit, and Guangzhou and Shenzhen, are keeping everybody on their toes, admitting some decline in the economy, and basically asking governments to cut local inefficient expenses, etc.
Okay.
But there's also many things that are the repercussion, the consequence, I think, of the trade war.
Right.
And these are on the China side of things, because this is where we operate.
Yeah.
It is the lowering of tariffs, and there's more welcoming of more trade with other partners, and these partners are countries. Mm-hmm. So definitely there's been a reduction of local taxes to reduce the stress on, for example, some of our manufacturing clients, or even domestic manufacturing companies.
Yeah.
To do what? To ease the tax pressure on these companies.
Okay.
And also to improve the foreign direct investment environment with upcoming regulations that will refreshen the FDI environment in this country.
Right. Okay. All right. So let me bring in Jamie then. Jamie, you're the point of view from a consultant and from somebody who works closely in this area. What do you make of the current situation, Jamie? What are you expecting to come out of these talks that are currently taking place?
Well, hopefully we can make some progress. I mean, neither side is going to win a trade war. A trade war can't really be won, especially in the case of China and the U.S., where the economies are so interconnected, and the manufacturing as well. So if the U.S. pushes too hard, it's going to push China to start developing more of their own in-house technology and to turn to other markets. And this is going to have an effect on the U.S. market and the global market as a whole. So I'm hoping that there can be some compromise reached, and a clarification of what each side wants in order to move forward.
And Jamie, what do you think the Chinese do want at this point in time then when it comes to these talks? Because, obviously we know that the biggest issue, I imagine, would be the tariffs. But then, Jamie, there is this huge case against this Huawei executive as well, which is overshadowing essentially these talks, isn't it?
Yes, for sure. For sure, China will like access, so they would not want to be blocked, for example, from government contracts for 5G in the UK, the US, Canada. That's, of course, something that they've been working really hard on, getting these big contracts, which really boost their name and their global penetration. And they're also taking issue with the trade war with the WTO and this idea that if China should follow the rules, then the U.S. should follow the rules as well. And I think that's very much the Chinese perspective on the issue.
Okay, Riccardo, I'll try with you once again, if I may. What do you think, Riccardo, should be happening next when it comes to trade between these two countries? Because, they both are powerhouses, and as we've already agreed upon, all of us, this is hurting both sides.
Your question is what is the desired outcome, because these two economies are the two largest in the world, and we are expecting specific positive consequences? Is this what you asked?
Yes, something along those lines. Yes, something along those lines. Yeah.
Well, it is highly desirable that there's a positive outcome for both economies. I think that it goes without saying that there is a solid portion of irrationality in some of the choices that the U.S. administration has laid out in the last year that have brought to an escalation, irrational escalation of this trade war. The fact that now Trump is, as you know, back into campaigning, he needs to come out of this trade war and the pause, the truce that has been in the trade war, in a positive way for the U.S. electors, for the U.S. In general, for the West, because let's take for example labor. Mm-hmm. If the trade war has been oriented for the United States perspective to bring back jobs or create new jobs in the U.S., unfortunately, this has not reflected in the outcomes of the war yet. If anything, the jobs that have ceased to exist in China due to the trade war have now reappeared or taken place in Southeast Asia. Because again, from my perspective, the Chinese, the firms, the foreign firms that have invested in China, are not leaving China entirely. Okay. If anything, they're trying to restructure and relocate to Southeast Asia.
Okay, but before I go into my break, in fact, I'm going to pick up on that point you made there, Riccardo. Jamie, do you think, as a Chinese official at Davos said, Jamie, that China is a lot more resilient an economy than many in the world have given it credit for? Do you think that China will come out of this A-OK, and that it will look for other greener pastures as well to trade with?
Talking to industry insiders in China, they were working in the steel industry. They were saying that they've already negotiated prices very far into the future, and that a lot of the products they're making, people in the US cannot make them. So the companies have no choice but to buy at the agreed prices and then pay the tariffs and then pass on those costs onto the US consumers. And financially, I think that China has much more in the way of financial reserves and resource reserves than the US. So they're in a position to weather it out. And then we have the Belt and Road Initiative, where China is, investing significantly in infrastructure across Eurasia and breaking into new markets. So while the US is a valued and important market, China's in a position to diversify, where I think US is already in all the market that it's going to get in. I don't think their ability to diversify is the same as China.
Okay, viewers, we're just going to go very quickly into a short break. We'll be back, of course, with the rest of this very important topic about the China-US trade war. We're going to discuss Huawei a bit more in detail after this break. Stay with us for that. Thank you for staying with us, viewers, as we continue our discussion on the U.S.-China trade war, that meeting happening right now. And of course, we're now going to be talking a bit about that case on Huawei and the executive being arrested there in Canada, the U.S. seeking extradition of her to the United States. Let's discuss all of that a bit further. We're joined still by Mr. Riccardo Benussi, who's Deputy Regional Manager at Dezan Shira Associates. He's joining us from Shanghai still. We're also now joined by Mr. Einar Tangen, who is a political and economic affairs commentator, and he is joining us from Beijing. Einar, thank you for your time once again and joining us here in The Scope. Einar, give us your thoughts at this point in time. When we look at this case in Huawei, and obviously it's overshadowing, I imagine, these talks, at the very least the spirit of these talks that are currently occurring between these two delegations. What are your thoughts on that case? Is this, do you think, and I'm just hypothesizing at this point in time, an effort by the U.S. to almost limit or try to limit China's growing strength when it comes to technology?
Well, yes, you hit it on the head. I mean, this is a purely political ploy that's being used. Basically, Donald Trump, he likes to put his opponents a little off their game. As you recall, he was firing missiles at Syria over the desert when he was sitting down with Xi Jinping in Mar-a-Lago. And even during this last round of intermediate talks, he was sailing ships before the talks, he was sailing ships through the Taiwan Straits. And then after the talks, during the talks, he was sailing ships within 12 miles of the Dispute Islands in the South China Sea. I think from his point of view, from a real estate, he thinks that this is very clever to put somebody off their game, but I don't think he understands that this has kind of become see-through, and that, quite frankly, the Chinese have a playbook where they anticipate that these types of things are going to happen.
Riccardo, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think this is genuinely just America putting itself first, looking out for the interests of its own companies at this time?
Oh, that's a very good question. In fact, I think that a trade war between giants of the economy is nothing new to China and the U.S. There have been many in history, but based on economical constraints, based on dire situations in one or other economy. But apparently, Trump is actually embracing this protectionism for what it represents. So this, compared to other presidencies and administrations in the U.S. in terms of trade war against other economies, would make them quite a case, quite unique, so to say. So this initiation of these barriers are actually very strong, and domestic industries right now are probably not even requesting this kind of, or this level of protectionism. This is something that has been widely confirmed. But this is, as Einar said, who I've have the pleasure to meet 9 years ago in Beijing, is actually the main point of the character of Trump. So being caught off guard and waiting for tweets to suddenly turn things around and turn the tables around. But I think that the general environment around China and U.S. is fourfold. There's the military talk, the political talk, technological talk, and the economy. And the Huawei case, for example, is in the technology, where there's also intellectual property and transfer of technology. And in economy, and the economical pillar, there's the trade. Yeah. So they're quite separate. But there are things that China is doing strongly, and I think that, if I may, we as in the consulting industry, we have the particular view on the trade war, which is the view from the small medium enterprise or the multinational enterprise. So we follow the money, and then we analyze what is going on. We don't necessarily go into the politics, and that's why I appreciate the diversity of the audience today.
Right. But, okay. So if I may, Riccardo, I'd like to bring Einar back in. Einar, many people looking from the outside, Einar, and again, I'm hypothesizing here, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this view, but many people would say, Einar, that this is in fact less about the military aspects, or even the other aspects that we may discuss. But this is in fact a lot about just Trump as a businessman putting, as he promised that he would, really putting America first. Does this put America first, or does this in fact hurt America a lot more in the long run?
Well, actually, right now it's hurting America.